One of my fears as a parent was that my children would become elite sports performers. With my oldest daughter, no chance. She was a geek from an early age. Uh, Parental challenges with her were totally different, as people may know. Um, my next two daughters, though, showed a big interest in artistic figure skating and pushed each other along to greater and greater achievements as eventually up to sort of young teenage age. Eventually, their coach took us off to one side and told us that it was time to get serious. She said they should give up other interests and start training every day at 6 a.m. before school and some days after school. My wife and I discussed this, and we both came to the same conclusion. No way. They would have to give up so much so early in their lives to be laser focused on something where it would become a chore instead of fun. What do you think? Do you think we made the right decision? Hi, and welcome to Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help you keep you motivated about your own running, or maybe inspire you to try something new. My name's Alan, and with my co-host Cheyenne, we're going to talk today with Mary Cain about her new book, This Is Not About Running, a memoir.
In This Is Not About Running, Cain shares her whole story, offering never-before-told details and perspective to shed light on the normalized abuse in sports and advocating for a better future for athletes. Cain is fearless in her storytelling. She has a passion for writing, and each short chapter of the book recounts a vignette in present tense, bringing the reader alongside her. She gains speed, notches wins, and excels in school, and encounters cruelty and abuse starting early on and becoming deeper and darker throughout her time running for Nike. The memoir is aptly organized into 5 gripping parts of Mary Cain's young life, and they are titled Talent, Rookie, Competitor, Professional, and Champion. The book comes with trigger warnings on disordered eating, body shaming, sexual harassment, abuse, self-harm, mental health episodes, and suicidal ideation. About Mary Cain. Mary Cain's a medical student at Stanford University School of Medicine. After sharing her story with the world in a 2019 New York Times op-ed, Cain has dedicated her career to driving change in sport with an emphasis on athlete well-being and gender equity. She is a founder of Atalanta NYC, a nonprofit that employs professional female runners to serve as mentors for young girls, and serves on the board of the Athlete Survivors Assist, formerly known as the Army of Survivors, a nonprofit that brings awareness, accountability, and transparency to sexual violence against athletes at all levels. She is also a runner. Cain had a record-breaking professional running career that included becoming the 2014 World Junior Champion in the 3,000 meters and a 2013 World Championships finalist in the 1,500 meters.
So, welcome, Mary. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
The question we always launch people off with, and it's particularly relevant, I think, for your book and your situation, is why did you write the book, and why decide to write the book now? Because the events have kind of gone on for a while. You know, there's been some water under the bridge.
Mhm.
So why the book? Why don't you just put it behind you and forget about it? Why do it, and why now?
Yeah, I think the main why is because I felt there was a story worth telling. I think the experiences that I have had as a young athlete are really disturbing to me now as an adult and as somebody who, really in many ways loves the idea of sport and loves sport for like the kind of pure activity portion to it. I feel very strongly that like all children should be safe when they participate in sport. And so I felt that in telling my story, I could help potentially protect the next kid and hopefully empower people to continue to push for policy change, change personal behavior, and so forth, so that kids wouldn't have the experience that I did. But the why for timing is mostly just about my own healing journey. When I came out with my New York Times piece in 2019, kind of giving like a short intro in many ways to the story that I wrote about in my memoir, I was like in zero aid therapy to
Okay.
do that.
Yeah.
That was a very raw, immediate
Yeah.
response to me kind of coming to terms with stuff. And I think true healing and true therapy takes years. And there's a lot that unfolded in the years after my New York Times piece that make me grateful to my past self for kind of giving myself the time to really like work on myself and do kind of what I needed to do because I think there's sometimes an instinct for people to kind of like immediately if there's attention or opportunity to kind of grab it, but that felt deeply inauthentic to me back in 2019 because I still felt like I needed to kind of work through myself.
Do you wish, in retrospect, you didn't do it? The New York Times piece. It was quite a thing. I mean, we were covering Nike on the podcast, um, and not in 2019, but a couple of years later, and we ended up going back and looking at your stuff, and went, oh wow, um, which I think most of the world probably did. Um,
Yeah, no. I
and
mean, how I kind of maybe delineate it in my mind is no regret, no regret at all. But if I'm giving advice to the next person, I'm always like, you're allowed
mm,
to give yourself the grace as a survivor to work on yourself before you have to save others. And I think it's a very normal trauma response to be like, oh my gosh, this happened. I therefore must do A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
mm,
And it's a really in many ways like beautiful instinct and very brave instinct, but it's not necessarily something that I encourage others to do because I think you're allowed to be able to take the space that you need. And so for me, that was really ultimately after the New York Times piece.
mm.
Um, but I don't think regret would ever be a word that I would use. It's more just kind of now I kind of look back and I'm like, oh, okay. No wonder my therapist was like, that was a bold
Yeah.
move.
I think you go into that in the last few chapters of your book. You're very transparent about how you felt in the years past, following, sorry, the article, and how you responded to that in yourself. And I think you used the word therapy, which was like I never heard it as a verb before. It's fantastic. Like just going through that process. And I don't know if you credit that process for the kind of product you received as a book. It's very open, it's journalistic. I honestly feel like I'm reading someone's diary, and I remember feeling at times heavy reading it. Can you tell us more about how you settled on that format and if it is related to the therapy that you went through?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is related to it because I think have done enough kind of like immersive work that I felt very comfortable going there and having the skills to almost cope with the re-traumatization that is
Mm,
like writing a memoir like this. And I think the other piece, though, to like my why was over the last, I guess, like 6 or 7 years now, I've done a lot of more public advocacy work to prevent abuse in sport. And some of the work that I do includes being a board member of a nonprofit called the Athlete Survivors Assist. And, in doing that work, sometimes I'm, talking to folks who are maybe like in policy work in some capacity and like talking about, from the lived experience perspective, like what athletes are experiencing, whether they're navigating systems like Safe Sport or into so forth. And I think what I've realized in doing that work is that what resonates the most with people is like a truly personal experience being shared because I think it humanizes systems that I think so often in our society today we just kind of like minimize people to like 30-second clips and buzzwords and talking points and all sorts of things that, I understand it's like the changing nature of media, but as somebody who was like a lifelong reader and writer, it just felt like something that was like deeply troubling to like be how we talk about really complex issues like abuse, that usually is so much more than just like one bad guy, one stupid girl,
hmm.
which I think is so often how the media can portray abuse. And so for me, it was kind of like if the purpose of the book is to like help prevent abuse going forward, then let me use my years of experience of trying to do that work and
Mhm.
kind of pull from the things that I know had the most impact when I was actively doing it. And that was a very like personal, raw first person account.
Do you take caffeine when you run? Lots of people do because it's in gels and stuff. And caffeine's legal and it's been proven to work. There's actual science that shows that it improves your endurance running performance.
And there's anecdotal data from when you have your coffee in the morning and you go for a workout versus when you forgot to have your coffee or you didn't have time and you went for a workout and it was terrible.
And the trouble with coffee is there's a lot of liquid just to get your caffeine dose.
Yeah, so then you have to stop for the bathroom mid-workout. Very impractical. Which is where Caffeine Bullet comes in.
What's caffeine bullet, Liz?
It's a caffeine supplement. It's wrapped up like in a candy. So, and it tastes like candy. And you can get 100 milligrams or 85 milligrams, which is about a cup of coffee, but without the liquid.
So we've tried the mint flavor and the chocolate orange flavor, and they're both pretty yummy.
If you want to try them for yourself, we do have a 20% off discount code. So go to the link in the show notes and you can check out what Caffeine Bullet is and get your 20% discount.
Pretty generous.
It is pretty generous.
And we'll get a small benefit, so you're helping out the
Speaking of which, back to the podcast.
Wow.
I know when Shan and I started to read it and we started to message each other, we were I think we were both sort of taken aback a little bit, pushed back by the heaviness. Not that it's sort of deep and heavy, but I think your style, it's first person, particularly at the start of the book. Everything is in little short snapshots, like sort of vignettes. Everything's stripped away other than the issue. And here's 2 pages of one issue, bam, and it just punches you. And then you skip straight to another issue and bam, and it punches you again. And then it skips. And we were texting each other saying, are you okay? Have you read the first 5 chapters, 10 chapters yet? And are you all right? Do you need anyone to talk to? Because we were sort of, I mean, we're smiling, but it's kind of serious stuff, isn't it? I mean, I guess you're probably looking at what we're saying and saying, okay, I achieved my objective. Then that's what I set out to do in the book. But it's certainly, everything is stripped away other than the particular one issue, and it just hits you, and you can't. As you're reading it, you've got nowhere to hide. You have to face it, and you go, oh. You take a breath, and you read the next one. It's another one. And what I was feeling as I was reading that was, coach, the coach, even when you're being bullied at school by some girls, yeah, okay, it's not good, but every school and every person experiences some bullying. So that was just, okay, how are you going to deal with whoever bullies you at school? That was how I got through school, basically. You know, how do you learn a coping skill? And that's one thing, and it's not right, but it's one thing. But the thing that was screaming at me all the time was the coach. That's where the responsibility lies, for somebody to take things seriously and nip things in the bud. And what skills do they have? And it seemed like your coach at the school that I've forgotten the name of now.
Bronxville?
Yes. Was a reputable coach, but had a lot to answer for in terms of those first 10 chapters.
Yeah. I mean, I would say when you grow up in a really wealthy town, it's not that hard to be like a really good sports team when you're competing against really small, less wealthy towns. And
Okay.
so I've always kind of found it to be like slightly ironic the
Yeah.
extent to which we sometimes celebrate the accomplishments of like a grown man based on the accomplishments of like hundreds of young girls who were the
Yeah.
people who were actually succeeding and accomplished. But yeah, I think for me, part of the reason that I don't name anybody who is a minor over the course of my experience is from what you're saying. Like, there's a certain degree that like childhood's really hard, like being a preteen, being a teenager. And the reason that my high school experience was really significant pre joining the Nike Oregon Project was the behavior of adults set me up to be even more kind of vulnerable in the relationship that I ultimately developed within the Nike
Hmm.
program. But I think you're correct in saying like the coach, the school administration, the other parents of my teammates, their behavior was incredibly disturbing in retrospect. And I think, now I'm 30, so I'm at that age where like, you see 17-year-olds and you're just like, they're quite literally children. And
Yeah.
I was only a part of my high school program up until the age that I was 16. I left the girls' team when I was 15 because bullying was that bad, and my coach didn't ever intervene or support me in any sort of capacity. And so the kind of maybe why behind going into some of that is because I think when you have these systems where the response of people is like, well, he got a bunch of little 14-year-old girls to run really fast for 40 years, you're kind of like, well, if that's why we celebrate people, but we don't look at like how they're treating them or
Mm.
what the kind of culture that's being set up in sports, I think it's really easy to kind of look at experiences like mine and be like, oh, there was one problematic person during one problematic period, instead of being like, whoa, there was this whole system that like by the end she really had no one to turn to. Really besides my family, they were the only people who really kind of were a thread throughout. Um, and in many ways, the younger years were, I think, the hardest for me to write about because I think in its own way, back to our new verb, I think I therapied myself a little less with that in some
Yeah.
ways. Um, but it was good to like really dig into.
I'm curious. This is a question I had very early on because you seem to have intellectualized strange behaviors as a high school freshman or sophomore, and for context,
Mhm.
that's grade 9, grade 10. It's the first couple of years of high school. There's a lot going on in a teenager's life, and for someone to be able to, and let alone have the burden of intellectualizing those behaviors, these occurrences. We're talking about references to a mother of a teammate of yours, which we'll get into soon again, and just seeing all these patterns of behaviors form. Did you at any point turn around and feel confirmed in other people seeing this as well? Did you feel seen in any way? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, I think what was difficult was there were almost like two like groups, if you will, that like in some ways was like, hey, this behavior is bad. Number one was my family, right? Like my parents from the get-go were like, what the heck? Why are these adults running around in short shorts trying to like get on the track with a bunch of girls? Why is this coach having her like prop her foot on his lap to tape her shoes? Like
Mm.
there were so many things that my parents were always like, this is creepy, this is weird. And then as the bullying ratcheted up and as parents started screaming at me and like getting in my face and making me feel unsafe, my parents are going to the school and complaining. But the problem is that, when you have a really powerful person and you have these two individuals fighting against someone who has essentially like a bunch of rich parents like donate to the school, it creates this system where like you kind of see your parents being like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But you see this whole system ignore them. You see this whole
Huh.
system
Hmm.
literally say to my parents, like, he's a work in progress. Like, yeah, he's 60 years
About the
old.
coach?
But yeah, that's what the athletic director said to my mom. And she's like, how is
Yeah.
he a work? Like, what are we talking about? And there was a lot of, kind of language coming back to me from folks in the administration of like, we know the bullying's really bad. But he's done so good for the school. He's won so many things, and she,
Mm.
she's kind of nerdy, like almost kind of excusing the
Yeah.
behavior and yet still agreeing with it. So th these people who are so strongly defending me, aka my parents, I'm kind of watched getting like pushed back time and time again, and I think it made this kind of confusing dynamic of me being like, okay, I do have allies, but it seems like it's just my parents because even other folks within the town would sometimes like go to my parents and be like, "Hey, what you're going through is so horrible. I'm so sorry." My parents would be like, "Hey, like, can you step up for us?" And
Yeah.
they'd be like,
Hmm.
"Oh, absolutely not. I will be like completely
Yeah.
like kicked out of this town." And
Yeah.
so I think it's a way of saying that like, yes, there was support, both direct and that kind of indirect support of people, kind of whispering to my parents on the side. But there's a certain point where all I'm seeing at, as you said, at those kind of vulnerable ages is if you stand up for yourself, nothing really gets better.
Hmm. Hmm. And
Yeah.
you,
On a personal note, my kids all went to a private school. When I came here from to Canada from Australia, there was French speaking, English speaking, because I'm in Montreal. We said, "Oh, we'll send them to private school in English to make it easier for them." But like all the rich kids were basically going to the school. And what we saw was discipline, instead of discipline being, well, people were just, you know, were badly behaved. You'd get children who were just entitled and they would just go through a behavior mode knowing that daddy would come and sort it out because daddy is paying a large fee to the school,
Hmm.
and the school will then rationalize. They don't go, "Oh, well,
Yes.
he's giving us lots of money, so we can't discipline his kid." What they do is they go, "Oh, well, it's not so bad, and we've spoken to the people, and it won't happen again," and it just perpetuates. So you get an institutionalized sort of situation. It sort of reminded me a little bit.
as you bring up, going to Bronxville High versus public school system, when you're in a public school system, you can be sort of shadowed away
We
from this.
were a public school.
Oh, this
Oh,
is a public
This
school.
is a public school, but in a very wealthy
wealthy
community
neighborhood.
and in
Yeah,
a very
Oh,
small
yeah,
community in a way that like you would think there
yeah,
would be more separation of
yeah.
power, but this was the sort of community where it's been so, I write about this really horrible high school experience that I had, but I, had some really good friends. We were a K through 12 school. We just we're the nerds. And
mhm.
Yeah.
it's been funny having all of those friends text me as they're
Mm.
reading it because they're like, wow, like no one has just almost been so honest about our experience and like
Mhm.
really just shared it in such a way. And one of my friends was, kind of talking about it because it's the sort of thing where I had expressed to him that I think some folks within the running world, like I generally don't like try to kind of remove myself a little bit from like the online banter around my memoir. But there's sometimes this energy of like, oh, she was probably a little over dramatic about like her high school experience. And some of my high
Hmm.
school friends have seen that discourse online and they're like, no, absolutely not. Who are these
Yeah.
people? And I'm like, it's okay, guys.
Shout
You're
out those
defending it.
friends for
Yeah.
real. Shout out.
Yeah.
And your parents, of course, for backing you up from day one. Shout
You know, you know
those are your
that
day ones.
that sentiment comes
Exactly.
from the fact that you stripped it back so much.
Yeah, it
Um,
Yes.
was really raw.
yeah,
Hmm.
and that's why
If
people are saying, there's just we're only seeing bad things. It must be Mary's fault."
mhm.
Yes.
Because
And I also think
we
it's like
we had a
women.
little debate about that, and we said, no, 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 read on, read on, read on. You can see
Yeah.
the story
Because I
Yeah.
evolving.
personally come from, I'm a high school track coach, I'm a high school
Hmm.
cross country coach, and we're in a public school, like really average, middle of the road kind of place. Nothing like you speak, more of the middle of the bell curve diagram kind of place. And I would get physical reactions if I saw things that you were describing, just just repulsive stuff. But and I do want to specifically mention a couple of things because of course we want our listeners to read the full book, but there are
Hmm.
moments where we're going to not hanging your Gatorade New York Student of the Year award, right? If I'm
Yeah.
saying that correctly, was that the award? Yeah.
Yep.
And there were times where a coach Mitchell, which we talk about, claimed you had autism while speaking to another adult to sort
Yeah.
of excuse the bullying that you were a victim of. And these
Yeah.
are just examples of the vignettes we read. Um, I really personally want to know, we both want to know, when you were experiencing this bullying at the hands of adults, coaches, teammates, peers, wherever it goes, what do you want younger athletes to know as they move forward? What's some advice they can move forward with if they face that?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that some young people have asked me after reading it, because, obviously like a lot of high schoolers, who I have more like, connection to personally, after reading it will share with me like their own experiences. And I think the thing that I always kind of say is like part of the thing that I see as a problem in like girl sports is obviously like all these kids drop out. But for me, that was never really in my mind because I was like, I will leave this town. I will leave this
Oh,
school. There
Hmm.
are better days ahead. And I think the thing that's really difficult as a young person is to kind of understand there is a certain point where if the school's not willing to intervene and adults are not protecting you and you are unsafe, like you are a child, right? Like we can't put like almost children into positions of adult power because that's not how the world works. That's not what exists. And so often the advice that I give, rather than being like, rally or do this or start a
Yeah.
petition, because let's get real, that wouldn't have helped me,
Yeah, the
um,
revolution.
is kind of be like, there will be better days. Like,
Okay.
please do not internalize this as a failing in yourself. This coach is acting inappropriately. These parents are acting inappropriately. Whatever the individual's experience is, but please know that like this is not the actual act of running or the act of whatever sport you're participating in. This
Mm.
is somebody who like deeply needs help and needs to stop vicariously living through the joy of like children's sports. And even if right now you don't feel safe or comfortable being a part of this program, that doesn't mean you're not going to in the future. And so like don't necessarily like lose that love for sport more broadly is sometimes the messaging that I try to give. And also always go to the adults that you trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that is something that made it so that, at least having my parents' support, at least being able to have those figures in my life who I could go to, don't ever as a kid feel like you need to do things alone because I think there is just, and it's part of the reason I wrote my memoir too. There's such a fallacy around childhood that I've noticed having been a phenom in that we just will kind of be like, oh, they're really talented like an adult, therefore they are an adult.
Yes.
Hmm.
Instead of being like, no, like I was not legally an adult person.
Yeah.
Like I can't navigate certain systems without adult help and really encouraging kids to like find those role models, whether in the home, through their school, wherever, so that they kind of have those people who can also be their champions.
Yeah, you sparked a whole
Yeah.
bunch of questions there, but before I get too far away from it, very specifically, I would like to know, does Chloe's mum in the book know who she is? Because I
I
assume
mean,
maybe you changed the names, but does she
yeah.
does she know who she is in the book?
I mean,
Because
she's got to.
because
She's got
I mean
to. She was there.
I have a term, and I guess I'll just get under the explicit warning. Um, she appears batshit crazy, basically. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
hmm Yeah, I mean, I would say that anyone who is in the book was at those events. So,
Hmm.
I will say the high school friends know who people are.
yeah,
And they not all of them knew all of those experiences that I had, to be clear. But even in not knowing that, I think, certain people's behavior are no and were not a secret at the time that things were happening. The school was aware of it. And I think for me, though, the reason that I have continued to maintain people's like anonymity is more because they were parents of kids.
hmm,
And I just felt very strongly that, even
could
if those
reflect
kids
on the
behaved
kids. Yeah.
badly, I kind of was like, your childhood poor behavior shouldn't necessarily be what defines you because at
Hmm.
the end of the day, we are kids. But I think all of those parents should feel very, very glad that I am generous in that way.
It's very cool of
You
you
could have told it a bit
because
more, maybe. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, for if for nothing else, Chloe's a child and she's a bit more nuanced in the book as a character. If for nothing else, that she's just a kid. So it's really cool that you did go around that way.
No,
I
thank you. And I
suppose.
mean, I've had a lot of people, and again, it's usually kind of low key my friends who will get like mad at seeing things online and then
Yeah.
report things back. And I'm like, guys, this is not my first rodeo being written about online. Like, you don't have
Yeah.
to tell me. But I do think there is this like language around me being spiteful, which I find very interesting. And I think part of it is because no one would call me spiteful if I was a guy. Like, no one would read
Hmm.
this book and be
Hmm.
like, oh, like he's being really mean about his teammates. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a gendered word, especially in sport. But I find it really interesting because I think that tends to reflect more on other people's discomfort that others can do bad things to people versus it actually being a reflection of like many of the choices that I made within the book because there's so many stories I didn't tell or I chose to only tell or name people in situations where I felt like it was like kind of appropriate. But I just figured that what we were just talking about kind of made me think a little bit of that and how if as a reader you're kind of like, wow, I'm uncomfortable that she's naming people. Like it's okay to be uncomfortable while reading this book. Like this is a really uncomfortable read.
Mm,
Like I had to
yeah,
live through this,
yeah.
but like maybe take like step back and kind of wonder why and what is that bringing up for you? And it's probably in some degree of projection and why.
That's a good point.
Yeah, the other thing that occurred to me while you were talking about being a phenom and the fact that you were uh, uh, you were it's definitely a good word for you because you definitely were at a very young age. And what happened is that it always put you in a situation where you were in sporting arenas right the way up to Nike Origin Project. You were in sporting environments with people who are considerably older than you. Do you think that that made things worse
I think it
for
did
you?
because I think I was always the lowest of the totem pole because not only was I
Mm,
female, but I was a girl. I wasn't even a woman. So when it comes to like the respect of folks in power, it's like, you know, you're just treated like dirt at the end of the day. And I think even amongst the competitors, more so when I was in the professional sphere and much less so when I was in the high school world. But there would be this dynamic of like I'm beating older women. And to me, that didn't seem particularly odd because they also sometimes beat me. Like
hmm
you're just racing in the same way that I was while in high school. But I think even, amongst female competitors, there was kind of a uncomfortable dynamic that I think as an adult, I'm sometimes like, I think they were competing in a world that there was limited resources, limited money, limited power. And here you have some like really exuberant young person show up, be like, "Can I be your friend?" And you're like, "I
Yeah,
actually hate you. You're,
yeah,
you know, getting more spotlight than I am."
yeah,
And I'm like, "Oh,
yeah.
whoa, lady."
You're putting your hand in my cookie jar. How can you be my friend?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think I was also coming at it from this perspective of years of being much closer friends with my competitors than teammates. And so I went into professional women's running being like, oh my gosh, these people are going to be my new friends. Not really having the like
hmm
maybe adult mindset of like, whoa, maybe the 30-year-old woman shouldn't be friends with a 17-year-old. That like now I'm like, oh, okay. But I think what's so fascinating is like now as an adult who does active mentorship, and I'm sure you can relate to this as a teacher, like there's ways to like set respectful boundaries when you do feel like they're kind of crossing into that like thinking you're going to be pals instead of,
hmm
like having a professional relationship or an adult to child relationship. But that's not what I was experiencing. And I always like to clarify that because I think sometimes people, even when I was like going through it, would be like, what do you expect? You're 17. And I'm like, well, I expect you to still treat me with respect and with kindness. I don't expect you to like glare at me or like, do some like bitchy movement when we're on the track. Like I just if you're trying to set a boundary, there's ways to do that with like kindness and respect.
Yeah.
And I would have been totally like ready for that. And there were folks who I did feel that with. Like there were I mean, I always say like I love field event athletes and sprinters because they were incredibly kind to me and often generous to me when I would travel for events. And I feel like they had a way of like putting up that like, okay, you're a kid, I'm an adult wall while still letting me sit with them at the lunch table.
I think when you point to that, especially the setting boundaries part, it must be difficult as an athlete where you're competing with people. You are told you are at the same level as these people. You are equal to them. In fact, you might be even better than them. And
Hmm.
age sort of becomes more blurred. If you're 18 competing with a 25-year-old for top place in any meet, your age isn't that big of a deal. It just talks about your potential, if anything. So to be in a situation where you're still 17, 18, and you said resources were lacking, but there weren't even the basic resources to help a minor go through the process of becoming a teenager within an adult world. And it really seemed that when you were there, you didn't really have anyone around you to support you when you were breaking down or when you're having a moment, or even if you felt lost, you wanted to go. There were times in your vignettes where you mentioned going over to shake the hand of your opponent or just congratulate them, and you had one idea of how the interaction would go, but it went a different way. Was there no sense? Was that ever brought up? Was it ever even discussed? How did that go in the first or second or third time when you started seeing this pattern?
Yeah, I think the problem was that like the folks who I would go to at that point when I was like in the professional world was Alberto and the Nike Oregon Project and my fellow teammates.
Hmm.
And the language that I was kind of getting from them was like, obviously that's going to happen. Like
Huh.
everyone's going to be an asshole to you. And part of it was, Galen speaking from his own experience of
Yeah.
being a young person who competed at a professional level and Centro having been similarly. And honestly, some of my female teammates just being like, people don't like us. Like we're on the Oregon Project. Like we beat them. That's just kind of how this goes.
Yeah.
And so I was coming at it kind of from this lens of kind of the people who I would go to being like, wow, why did they do that? They were kind of like, no shit, Sherlock. And I was like, oh, okay. And it became almost this really interesting dynamic where it both became kind of isolating because it was like, well, then my teammates are my people now, right? Like I'm seeing
Hmm.
this full like flip from my high school experience where my competitors were
Mm.
my friends. Now my teammates are my friends. And also, it created this dynamic in which I would see all of these other people, and I would have the whole backing of like kind of all of my teammates who, let's get real, everyone in pro running is like 1 to 2 degrees removed from one another. They had been teammates with people. Like, I know who dated whom, I know
Yeah.
like what relationships didn't end well. Like, the tea is piping. So from my perspective, then it would kind of feed into this, cycle where I'd be like, wow, this person was really mean. And they'd be like, yes, they are. These are the sorts of things they say. And it would almost kind of further isolate and create this setting where I was like, wow, I really, and in good authority sometimes know some of the stuff these people are saying, even kind of beyond their behaviors. I'm maybe going to stop trying. And
Hmm.
then ultimately, when things start to go poorly, and I'm, spoiler alert, running off into a thunderstorm alone and no one chases after me, I'm not thinking, wow, shock. I'm thinking, yeah, probably most of these people want me to die, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, that's quite literally the mentality that I have because I just have both my own lived experience, but then also the stuff that's being said to me. And that's even why, like, there's throughout this my memoir, there's moments where I share stuff that was being said to me. And admittedly, I don't always know what's true or what's not true, especially coming from Alberto, because it was
Mhm.
his language being shared, and that was just like the warped reality that I lived in.
Hmm.
And so, in the same way that like some of the gossips I was getting, like who knows what was fully true and what was just, people gossiping. But I think there is so much that was not said in this memoir, or even energy that you might get about how I felt towards people. That was partly because I was kind of in this bubble where like all I was hearing was the negativity.
And this gaslighting we talk about, the things that you were told and being told this is normal, you got to live with it, and this is just how the real world is, or however it was language to you, was common and it was consistent. And when we talk about things like, as you brought up, being under a tent during a thunderstorm and having that interaction with Alberto Salazar and running off into a rainstorm, or when it bubbled, for lack of a better term, and sort of hit a breaking point for you where you left a track practice, I believe, and ran
Hmm.
off hoping, and I think you and your therapist in your book, as you
Looking
mentioned,
for a
had to
truck.
admit to yourself, yes,
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
for a truck, and that's real. This is
Yeah.
that's you have to see that you were for lack of you were suicidal, right? That there
Yeah.
were, it wasn't just ideations. That is a bubbling point, and that is a peak. But everything before that, people have told you it's common. We gaslight. Well, we don't say we gaslight, but this is just normal, and they gaslight you that that's how it is. My question for that is that something you still think occurs in today's running? Not because we want to know the tea, but is that an
Hmm.
issue that we still see in today's pro running, collegiate running, people who are in your spheres and everywhere else?
I think the lack of response within the pro community towards my memoir has told me
Huh.
more about the change or lack thereof than probably anything else would. Because admittedly, you know, people weren't particularly nice to me then. Most aren't particularly nice to me now. But usually it's more through silence. And I think like there totally have been some folks who have, texted me or messaged me support and like I say to them every time, like, oh my gosh, my number is now like almost on two hands. This is crazy. Like, thank you for being one of the brave pros. But I think if people really genuinely felt that there was change, right? Maybe they would have more public conversations. Or even if they felt there was no change and we needed change and they wanted change, there would be more dialogue. But the pros who are texting me are like, girl, the long runs are going crazy talking about this, but I'm not getting those texts. I'm not getting those DMs. And I think that creates this kind of environment to me where I just assume, and I think probably assume correctly, that most folks within the professional running world, even if they're like really supportive of the message, are kind of scared by how honest I am because there are still problems. And if we acknowledge this memoir, then those people who are continuing to prop up the problems that exist might see your support and therefore you get in trouble. But yeah, I'm pretty I'm like absolutely not overly cynical. I think there has been positive change in many ways, but I think in general within the professional world specifically, I mean, Pete Julian's still a professional coach of a program, and I don't think he's someone who should be coaching.
I hear you. I hear you. That is tough to hear.
And on a couple of podcast um, focused issues, um, I spoke with Ben Rosario when he was coach of Northern Arizona Elite. They seem to have a pretty good setup. Matt Fitzgerald talked to us extensively about his time in the group. They seem to have a setup that was in no way as toxic as Nike Oregon Project. I've looked at that through the book Win at All Costs that came out from a journalist, and
Hmm.
also Karagacha's book. We've sort of looked at it from several angles, and it didn't look like that. I also talked with Mark Coogan, who's the coach of New Balance Boston, and he told me that one of the things that they did was when they took on a new, and they're mostly girls in his group, middle distance girls. El Saint Pierre, I guess, is the most famous one. When they took on new people, what they would do is they would if they were thinking of bringing somebody into the group, they would have them meet with the group first, and then have the group say whether they thought they were a good fit.
Hmm. And that's
Um,
pretty normal. I think most
yeah,
groups do that in a way that, like, of course, the Oregon Project, like, was an extreme example, but in at the end of my memoir, have a laundry list of things that currently go on with professional coaches who are currently coaching. And so, like, not to say anyone in particular, team is like doing anything at Nike Oregon Project level per se. Like, I wouldn't know. Um, but I think there's a lot of I think for me at least, I really respect people when they come out and talk about the problems that they still see, right? Doesn't mean you have to be overly negative. It doesn't mean you can't celebrate the successes or the positivity that you've instilled. But I do feel in a lot of interviews, at least, I mean, I don't really listen to them anymore, but at least after my New York Times piece, there were folks who were literally doing interviews being like, Mary's making it sound really bad, and these were my great experiences. And then I'd be
mm.
like, you named at least four people who I know are deeply problematic in this sport, right? Like on those sort of podcasts. And so I think to me, what I almost consider now, and this is like not a sport thing, but just in life generally, a really good sign, and it's going to be something that I think about when I'm, applying to residency programs, right?
yeah,
Is it's not the people who are like, oh my God, we're all best friends and we love each other and we eat the same salad every day and we get
hmm
to pick and it's really,
yeah.
and we love each other.
That's
But
equally
it's more
false.
like the hours are pretty long, but it's a good team. Sometimes
Hmm.
the cases are really tough. You're not going to get this sort of exposure if you're interested in this. Like, that's the language that makes me feel trust. And ironically, that's part of the reason I actually felt some trust in Alberto very early on, is he
Going to
kind of
drive you
talked
hard.
about the
Yeah,
negativity of the program. And it wasn't in
yeah,
that sort of way. It wasn't in a like, I'm going to push you. It was more like, I know right now we don't have as many women. I want to recruit more. Like, he was really going
hmm
through very like practical
yeah.
things. And so it's not to say that it's like always a foolproof method of, delineating where there's problems and not, but I have a real wariness when like people don't talk about the good and the bad when we kind of just know there are some pretty systemic issues within the
Yeah.
sport.
That's
Yeah,
entirely fair.
I guess just in the way that I kind of blame the coach rather than the track bullies. I also, this is just personal, and I've got more years than both of you guys put together probably, so I've got the experience. But yeah, I also blame Nike rather than Alberto because there's somebody in Nike should have jumped all over him. I should have had controls. That's not to say he didn't do wrong and he deserves everything he gets. He deserves his ban. And I'm on record already in many podcasts talking about this. And and by the way, cards on the table. I haven't bought anything by Nike for maybe 5 years. And I said that's the only way I personally can tell them what I think of them, is
Hmm.
not to buy their stuff. And if you're listening to this podcast, anyone, don't buy Nike stuff.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and that's all monologuing. But my question for you has Nike ever come out either publicly or privately to you, um, and admitted that we screwed up. We thought we were
No.
doing a great thing, but we got it wrong, and blah blah blah.
No, if anything, it's quite the opposite.
They doubled down, so to speak.
Yeah, and much more been like you're a problem and you're dramatic or insert whatever their tweet was after
Mm,
my New York Times piece. Um, so no, and I also will say like I think that's something that I believe in strongly is like corporate courage is something that we do not see often, which is like when brands are able to be like we were the ones who hired an abuser. We propped up an abuser. We let this abuser
hmm.
create a system where they could abuse. And it takes a lot of courage for corporations to stand up. And I think that's something that, like, I mean, I've always said, had Nike just afterwards, like, reached out to me and been like, wow, that was horrible. We should put systems in place. We should create change. Thank you. I would have been like, great, you know? But I think, unfortunately, and this is why I again have some wariness about how much things have really truly changed, is if nobody is ever doing that, if USATF isn't saying that, if really any of the corporations that were kind of watching me day in and day out be a part of this system, my high school, if none of them can ever come forward and say anything, then it just instills doubt of like how much can anything change if the culture within these organizations are not one to support victims, but instead to try to tear them down.
I mean,
I'm like,
one wonders what the answer is to that question, other than don't buy their stuff. Um,
Hmm.
you actually sued Nike, and I assume you got a successful outcome from that.
Yeah, I usually don't really talk about the lawsuit specifically, and I think part of it is because I've noticed that I think even in writing this book, I think people like really wanted a win at the end, right? Like even my editor, who's amazing and I love her,
Hmm.
was like, "Can you please at the end just maybe like have the last chapter be like, you're on a run and like it's
Yeah,
fun or
yeah,
like
and you're
something,
enjoying it.
right?"
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm always like, that's like the purpose of my memoir is to create change to prevent abuse. And I think it's really, really, really uncomfortable for people to sometimes have the ending me being like, I think there's still a serious problem here. And that's
Hmm.
kind of why I felt like I had to write the memoir instead of there being kind of this like implied language of anything more, because I don't think there's anything that can ever happen that would, you know, like give me those years back or like
No,
make it so I was unabused or anything kind of like that.
I guess. Sorry, Shan.
I'm so sorry.
I'm dominating here.
No, 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 go,
You
please.
keep triggering me, Mary. Um,
Good answers.
Thank you.
from that point of view, do you wish you didn't do it like you did it? Would you take it all back? It's a kind of
No,
pointless question, but it's
I
fun to
think
have on a
that's
podcast.
I think so I've been really pushing against that question a lot when people ask me because I think it's deeply victim shaming. And I
Yeah.
think if you kind of look at the story from the lens that I was a part of, right? Like I was kind of perpetually trapped, right? Like when Alberto came to me, I had no other options. It wasn't like I
Hmm.
could have continued running for my school. It was either that or dropping out of track and field
Hmm.
altogether. When I was making the decision between college and pro, I didn't really have decisions. And of course, you can be screaming at the book as you're reading the pages, like, you actually do. You could do whatever you want. But when you're a child, like, that's not, nobody else would have been saying that to me. Really, besides, honestly, my parents at all times. Like, they were the only ones who were like, you could just go to Harvard. Um, but I think to me, there's part of the reason I think a lot of abuse victims have difficulty in some ways like working through their abuse and getting to like the other side of things is because there is so much language societally of like, should you have done something different? Are you at some way in fault? Did you make a bad decision along the way? What did you do wrong? What were you wearing?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
you're
I
right. You're
think
right.
in some
You're
ways
right.
that
And I'm
question
kind of
of,
reflecting that a little bit.
yeah.
But I suppose just to try and defend myself a little bit, I was trying to come to if if it was one of my daughters who was in your
Mhm.
situation, um, what could I have advised her to do that you didn't do?
Totally. So I think now what I often say to folks is there's a lot more resources online, like even with the nonprofit that I work with, the Army of Survivors, was their old name. Now they're the Athlete Survivors Assist. They have even just like things about like being better informed as a parent or being better informed as a coach or being better informed as a policymaker around like both trauma-informed language, but also trauma-informed policies. So now if like I was encouraging a parent who was going through a situation like I did in high school, I'd be like, look at the parent resources. There's things that you can tell your kid of like, hey, if your coach is texting you directly, like that should be against policy. And you can go directly to the school administration and maybe have almost even more like substantial professional documentation and organizations that you can reach out to that didn't exist when I was in high school. Because like Safe Sport
Mm,
wasn't a thing. So many of these kind of policing organizations that have since set standards just like weren't around. And so I think being able to use the organizations that are already kind of out there meant to support these exact things can be really helpful to help parents both navigate systems because I think it's very different if you go to a high school being like, hey, I have this organization kind of like saying that these are the standards and you are breaking them. That's much scarier than an individual person being like, hey, don't abuse kids. And that's sick that that's the world that we live in, but it's just part of the reality. So that's kind of what I usually advise people now is like find ways to get that kind of almost like institutional backing for change and also as an individual, like read through those resources lists because there's all sorts of things that even as a teacher, I'm sure, like if you were teaching 30 years ago versus now, there's been different trainings of like, you probably shouldn't be directly texting a teenager without another adult on
mm.
the line. Like all of these kind of like little rules that we didn't grow up with, so we might not instinctively know we should instill in our kids and like be like, hey, let me know if an adult directly texts you, or let me know if somebody says this to you. Those kind of little things have been normalized for so long that I think educating yourself on like warning signs is helpful.
Can you tell us more about that, about Atalanta NYC that you work with, Athlete Survivor Assist? What do each of them do? I know it's a packed question to ask about both, but what do each of them do? What is your role specifically, and how does it move the conversation forward, please?
Yeah, so Atalanta is a nonprofit that I founded in New York. And so I'm the founder and a board member now, after serving as like the CEO for the first couple of years. And we're a nonprofit that employs professional female runners to serve as mentors to girls in underserved parts of the city. So in many ways, it was established to kind of be this like dual impact approach, right? Where I think change more broadly from women's sport happens when you're both directly working with the next generation and also like having role models. So I kind of saw this as this like dual opportunity to like help kids who I saw as having less resources than I did. And as a result, maybe if they had been in the same position, couldn't have gotten out and couldn't have, had the same kind of like support system that I was able to have. Um, and then for the athletes, like we're just structured completely differently than all of pro running is, and that like the women are actually employees, they have roles within the organization, and are supported in ways that are like both short term for their running careers, but also long term set up to like kind of do whatever they want within the sport and hopefully have the empowerment to be like true leaders in sport, whether that's in coaching, whether that's in business admin, and even if they don't want to stay in sport, like we've just empowered some like really cool badass women to be be just like that much more successful than I
Can't be a
think
bad thing.
just yeah,
I
than
love that.
sports,
Yeah, can't be a
you
bad
know,
thing.
I
The-
love
exactly.
that.
So what you need is we need you know, old guy assists. There's sort of people like me who've got the mindsets that come from the 60s and 70s and have never changed. Um, Trying to turn them around, that's the sort of great power assist or something.
I think yes and no. Yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely important. And the only reason I say no is I think there's also a lot of folks who I'm like, it's something that I think about a lot where it's like just because you invite a woman into the room doesn't mean the culture is going to change, right? And we see this a lot with, coaching. Like after my New York Times piece, like almost every pro team like hired a woman. And like most of them were like past athletes who were like a part of these systems that like succeeded in these systems, had never spoken negatively about these systems, and
Mm,
then from everything that I've heard over the
yeah,
years, haven't necessarily
everything's
changed
fine.
them.
Yeah,
So I think there's ways in which it's I think it's easy for people to point the finger and be like, "Oh, it's the old dude in the room," instead of it being like, "No, it's there were so many people along my
yeah,
journey who didn't stand up for me." And that's not to say that some people weren't like afraid or weren't in their own way being torn down and therefore like the power dynamics were such that them stepping in would have been different than someone else. Like totally, totally have the grace to kind of extend that to others. But I think in all rooms that we walk into, there's always going to be a power dynamic. And just because you're maybe feel under someone else doesn't mean you don't have more power than the like 17-year-old girl next to you. And I think kind of encouraging as many people as possible, really throughout the generations, and
sure.
in a genderless way, to kind of be brave and, say no when things are bad,
Yeah,
I think is really important.
It's a great point. It's a corporatization of athletics where you just put someone up there to make it look good, representation. You show what you got to show, and as you've discussed, it's not just the coach. It goes further than that, and those kind of decisions sort of make it far worse than it would have been if you just had been able to have a conversation with a human across the room and figure things out. I like
Yeah.
that.
just starting to wind up. Tell us a little bit about Mary going forward. Um, we see from a running point of view that you've nominated for Ireland.
Yeah.
I think you'd
Yeah.
look good in green, so I think it would suit you well. So we see that, and we also see from a study point of view, you're now at Stanford doing a medical degree.
Mhm.
So tell us about both of those things.
Yeah, so I'm like running again. I had had surgery a couple years back now, here actually at Stanford, which is crazy now being a student here, for like a rare condition called popliteal artery entrapment syndrome, and I had the functional version of it. And it like really derailed my ability to just like be honestly physically active in a way that was like meaningful to me for a long
Hmm.
time. And over the last few years, I've been a mix of just like honestly happy with my life because I've gone off to do this really cool thing called med school. And also just kind of like reworking my body in a way to kind of see how it can move again. And it's been really fun because it's been very much my own. And at this point, like I've had the longest span of just like uninterrupted, injury-free training that I've had in a really, really long time. And training is probably, at least from my standards, dramatic. From my med school friends who follow me on Strava, insane. Um,
Oh yeah.
Right.
but yeah, I think it's something where it's like, I think the cool thing is I'm at a point in my life where with so many things, I'm kind of just excited to see where they go versus maybe having the mentality that I think you so often see in sport, which is like, I have to do this, I have to accomplish this. And then
Hmm.
it kind of sets people up with this like inability to move on with their lives. I think right now I'm much more that like med student who will be starting clerkships over the summer. And I'm like, I don't know what I want to do yet. Like, I'm so excited to like see what I fall in love with, versus like having a really rigid perspective of,
Yeah.
my future. And I think a lot of that's just from like I did that before, didn't go great. Now I'd much
Yeah.
rather see myself less as like a role or a thing I do and more just like a full person.
I think you've answered this question pretty much in parts in what your very last response was, and of course, as we dissected your memoir. But when you speak of your ending to the book, speaking of a win, as a reader personally, I felt like there was a win there. You spoke about how, as much as the New York Times article is not you today, it's a snapshot of who you are and how I understood it, and you don't want it to dehumanize you. What I
Yeah.
want to know, putting everything together, if I just want to hear it from your voice directly. Who is Mary Cain today, and what do you want us to know about you?
Yeah, I think what's so interesting, and it's something I like think about a lot in adulthood, is so often when people answer that question, they're just like, I'm a runner or I'm a med student, or they
Mm.
almost like insert
Snapshot.
the thing that they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
But it's like I think of myself as more like I'm happy, I'm silly, I'm hardworking, I'm these I almost like feel like I try to instead value my like traits versus the outcome of those traits because on any given day things change. I decide I want to go on a new path, and it doesn't mean that I've really changed that much. And I think about that, especially as an athlete, because I think it's really difficult for people once they retire to move on because there's this kind of like, what's next? And it's like, well, what are the things that made you great in sport? Because it's going to make you great anywhere. But it's just like valuing that piece versus the outcome, I think is something that is so important. And it's part of the reason I kind of ended it in that way. So that if somebody else had recently felt like, oh, I maybe for all these years had been on a path and now I'm interested in change, like that's okay. That's okay. Like that's something you're always allowed to do.
Does that kind of factor into your decision making moving forward for our medical nerds out there? I mean, you spoke about interviews where you might want to go into emergency medicine or internal medicines or working with athletes, and you left it open, which is such a brave thing to do. Is that also part of the reason why you're just waiting to experience what medical
Yeah,
school is
I
like?
just feel like there's so we write scripts about ourselves, and it's like the only version of myself that I know is my past and my present. Like I don't know what the Mary of tomorrow is going to wake up and think. Like I might go to a clerkship and just be like, wow, these people are like awesome, and
Hmm.
I'd love to work with them day in and day out, or I feel really
Mm.
energized, or this is kind of exhausting in a way that I didn't expect, or even just like emotionally, maybe this will fry me more than something else. And I think we sometimes do ourselves a disservice when we don't have the kind of the like ability to play and like be kind of curious. And it's something I think about even with like my writing, which was like I think sometimes people have imposter syndrome about doing something like that because they're like, oh, yeah, I'm a this or I'm a that. And I was kind of like, no, I've always been a writer. Like I've always loved to write. Just because it's never been a profession doesn't mean it's something that I can't do or enjoy. And I think that's the sort of thing that's important for people to remember.
Can't get it to come into focus, but is there anything specific on the cover that did you have a design influence on the cover with the shoes and the leg and the yellow?
I really want to
Uh-huh.
know this because
Right.
I've thought about it, and I really want to hear it come from you about the cover. Because just please do
Yeah,
it, please.
I definitely had a lot of input in the cover. Like one of my best friends, Carter Chrisman, was the photographer behind it. But it was actually I I felt very strongly that I didn't want the cover to be my face. Like I
Mm.
wanted it to be
Because lots
um
of people do.
a lot of people have it be their
Yeah.
face, and it felt like yes, this story is about me, but the point of this is like for others, and so it
Yeah.
felt like
You
limiting.
almost want to see yourself in
Yeah,
that picture if it's not
exactly.
you.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I was thinking like, oh, it should be my legs, and it was my mom who was like, it should be your scar. She's like, if it's gonna be your legs, it's got to be the scar. And I was like, yes. And she's like, because it's you. Like this is it is truly you. And she's like, but it's also
Oh yeah.
this
Now I
representation of like
see.
what it did to you, and like the kind of
Yeah.
the damage that it wrought. And she's like, it's going to be subtle because it's not like the hugest scar. But if you're looking at it and you see this is not about running and you just see this like gash down my leg, and
Yeah.
Dr. Lee did a great job. It actually looks pretty good.
I
I
didn't
actually didn't
notice.
notice a scar at all. I
No.
didn't know scar at all. I just remembered it was a knee, and your knee comes up as a theme. Good
Yeah,
job, doctor.
it's been funny. Even one of my friends was like, "Was that really your leg?" And I was like, "No, we got an actor." And I was like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah. The
How do we
role of
hire an
Mary's
actor
leg
for
was
like?
played today by.
Yeah.
And the spike was also a good point because I mean one of the first items that comes into your dialogues into your relationship with Alberto Salazar is the spike and the role it plays and whose spike that was and etc. So I don't know if it goes that deep, but it was just it was one of those things that you look at when you read, you finish reading and you look at it again and you just feel I don't know empowered to understand the image. It was really really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
I
cool.
appreciate that because if you thought a lot of thought went into it, a lot of thought went into it.
That's
I
good.
definitely tried to be very purposeful. Just part of it too is I love writing. So like even just like the idea of like thematic elements and making the story both like so true and so honest, but also finding ways to like make it as beautiful of writing as I could felt like something that as somebody who loves to write was like really important to me. And the whole idea of like the broader marketing package, like a cover, was so a part of that.
That's amazing. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this question because you shouted her out a few times. I would love to know, adding on to how the book came together, how your sister Anya helped you in publishing this book. If you want to shout her out in any way, I'm just genuinely curious how she helped you out in this.
Yeah, well, it's really cool because Anya just in and of herself is a writer, so she's previously
Okay.
published a book. So most of like our, I feel like conversations over the course of like the year and a half has been almost probably cannibalized by like book talk. And some of it can just be like as simple as like, here's like how I navigated marketing or here's how I did this. And yeah, my sisters are like incredibly talented writers and like creative people. And so
Runs
it's
in the
funny,
family.
like, yeah, like growing up, I was like, I am not a good writer. I was like, I am a horrible
Look at
writer
you
because,
now. What are you
You were
saying?
the jock of the
well,
family,
I
huh?
still think I still think compared to my sisters who
Mm,
are just like incredible, my gift was sometimes more just like I would get it done. But I was
okay.
like very comfortable with it being kind of messy versus
Okay.
it would just
Yeah.
be like lyrical from the like blank page, and I
Oh,
was like, oh my
perfection.
God, mine has no punctuation.
Yeah.
So
Run-on sentences.
yeah. So I would say everyone had impact in that sense that
Okay.
the creative side of me as like a reader and a writer has been like a lifelong journey.
Shout out Anya. I
Yeah, shout
do
out Anya.
shout out the whole family from supporting you every day, every moment that you went through this, and just helping you out. I really appreciate. I really, really like the chapter, the part you put in there.
Yeah.
I am very cognizant of the time. You've been very generous at the time you've extended for us. We really appreciate that. We usually wrap up by asking a couple of questions. The first one is, where would you like to direct the listeners to buy a copy of the book? And before you answer, I just want to confirm. Is it true that you personally recorded the audio version?
I did. I did. I
Nice.
personally recorded the audio version, and I was actually going to say I've been getting such positive feedback from people about the audiobook, which is so funny to me, only because I'm the one speaking, and I'm sure you guys knows that this is being podcast people, but like you'll hear your voice after and be like, "Oh my
Oh,
God."
great.
So I think it's so funny to me, but people have loved it. I think part of it is that I was very comfortable being very emotional in the reading. And so if
Okay.
you're interested, if you enjoy that sort of stuff, you you'll have maybe some more of my emotional influence directly in
Okay.
it. And I know I've had a few people reach out to me being like, I've done both, and it was really interesting because I might be more upset during ch certain chapters, but you were more upset during
Mm.
this other
Hmm.
one. And I think that dialogue's really funny. So I'm
Recording an
very much.
audiobook is very hard. However, you
Mhm.
said it was especially hard on you on certain chapters, right?
Yeah, there's definitely some chapters that I really like break down and kind of sob during. And it's, it's interesting. I think I'm just very used to doing very hard things. So in preparation for it, everyone was like, this is going to be the hardest thing you ever did. And then like there was a certain point, like first day, they were like, wow, we're so far through this. And you keep like randomly crying, chugging water, and keep
Getting on
going.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were like, wow, okay. The med school athlete, like
Mm.
constantly re-traumatizing yourself with advocacy work thing is starting to add up here. But it was hard, but
Okay.
it felt like something that I think for me, um, I've practiced in my own way. I've practiced doing hard things.
That's really cool.
And where to buy the book? Anywhere?
Yeah,
Anywhere and everywhere?
it's available anywhere. I mean, I'm as a avid reader, I am always like support local bookstores. And the awesome thing about this is it's quite readily available. In ways that a lot of bookstores that are kind of like smaller, more indie, you usually can find it or at least order. So if you can, that's awesome.
Where can people follow you if they want to keep up with your exploits, Mary?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I am on Instagram. It's at Run Mary Cain. I don't know if you're interested in the random med school updates. I'm sure I occasionally post on LinkedIn too, but those are probably my really only social medias.
The med school thing's interesting because I did a pharmacy degree, and I spent a year afterwards in like professional qualification in an internship
Mhm.
in a big teaching hospital in London. And if from a medical internship you get involved in that, I would say even now I still quote back that year as things I learned and people I met and experiences I had. And that was back in the 1980s. So,
Oh yeah.
um,
Oh yeah.
so,
Residency will be
so
great.
you're in for a a very rich experience. You should. I think you're looking forward to it, and so you should be.
Yeah,
Uh,
I definitely
you might not get much sleep,
am. I
but
mean, I love
everything
this.
else will be amped up.
Exactly, exactly. And I think it's such a privilege to like be in this profession, like in healthcare in general, because it's just you're really interacting with people like on so often their work today, and I think there's something very like I don't take that for granted, and I'm very proud to be going into this field as a result.
Yeah, Mary, you're right. Mary Cain has done hard things. You're doing hard things, and you're about to do other hard things. And I think you just showed us in the last little bit of time that you have not only all the support you need, but also all the neat reasons to be confident in doing it. I can't imagine going through one part of your life, and it seems like you've lived many lives already, which is really, really cool and inspiring.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And thanks for giving up your personal time to spend, an hour or so with some complete strangers who don't know you other than are very, very motivated and enthusiastic about your book.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. No, and thank you guys for chatting with me. I mean, I love being able to talk to people who are like kind of equally on the book end, because sometimes when it's just the running end, it's kind of like,
Hmm.
but the book end, I'm like, I love writing. I love the whole art form. So I really geeked out at those questions. I appreciate that.
And this won't be on the recording, but it seemed like for us as just a few hardcore runners for the regular public, but just average Joe runners in general, we've been waiting sort of for this story to come out for a while. And it was really cool to see it as not a snapshot of every moment, but also a progression and then this. I would say this story that is continuously evolving and you treating it that way instead of just saying, well, this is what happened, this is where I am, and here's a story was really cool. And I can't imagine the amount of vulnerability it takes to share that, write it, go through it, publish it, say it in an audiobook. So I personally, being the same age as you and coaching kids at your age, I personally want to thank you for doing that. It's a book that
Thank you.
I feel comfortable putting in my classroom and having kids read it whenever they want and can, and I'm going to reference it for the rest of my career. Thank you, genuinely,
I
Mary. Thank
really
you.
appreciate that. That's so kind of you to say. I feel like I don't often get emotional during interviews, but like that makes me kind of tear up. So thank you for that.
Me too, buddy. Thank you. We really appreciate your
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Awesome. But I hope you
Well,
guys have a great rest of your day.
cheers.
Good luck studying.
Yeah.
Okay, so some reviews on This Is Not About Running by Mary Cain. Yeah, if I was to sort of put it into some short, pithy words, I would say it's easy to read because it's in short chapters, but it's not an easy read because it's a bit of a gut punch. And when you get the first gut punch, you go, oof. And then you get another gut punch. And it goes on like that for a while, as you heard me explaining to Mary. So the chapters are short and the stories are trimmed to their essential elements. But the subject's not easy. There's a lot of bullying and a lack of intervention, which is, I find the most shameful thing, the lack of intervention and the lack of accountability. I know Cheyenne's a teacher, and I wonder how he feels about it. We heard a little bit about some of the comments as we went through. This book is called This Is Not About Running because it's about the abusive culture that can surround running and I guess anything, and the devastating effects of this and a system which lacks adequate controls. However, in the book, we sort of learn little about Mary outside her running. Mostly all her memories are centered around her running experience. So I guess that was really in order to give us a very focused view of what happened to her in those experiences. It was really nice to hear her talking about having fun with her friends during the conversation, because we didn't hear much about her having fun with her friends during the book. And that led me to worry about her a little bit.
Absolutely.
Basically, you should definitely read this book, whether you're a runner or not. And if you're a parent or if you're a teacher, you should definitely read this book. And by the way, you should stop buying Nike stuff until they admit they were wrong. At least come out and say, what we did was not right and we should have done it differently and we'll try to do better in the future.
Which you have been doing for the life of this podcast, because I remember since 2019 at our track practices, we've been talking about this. And if anyone, including myself, wore a pair of Nikes, we get side eyes and we'd have conversations about it. So shout out to you for that. You're the role model we follow for that.
I mean, we're not really a political platform. Everybody's can have their own opinions and do their own thing, but that's my opinion.
And I think it's a good one. And books like this make it more and more of an objective, closer to an objective opinion at the very least. As for my summary thoughts, I think Mary does a great job reflecting in the book. She takes her back to her thoughts from ages as young as 14, which I can't imagine someone in her late 20s, very early 30s being able to do. And it's just her raw reactions. And I really feel like we were there. And as you mentioned, we were there, and Mary does a good job of stripping it down to what we need, because the book is made to make us feel uncomfortable. It is designed to make us feel what she felt, because we're the actors of change. So we may not hear all the positives, but the positives might have been there elsewhere in different spheres of her life. But it's really important for us to see what she's going through. And Alan's right. His perspective as a girl dad is definitely similar to that of many. And my thoughts extend almost from the same place. As a teacher, coach, mentor, a caring adult, it was really hard to feel what you felt reading the vignettes without feeling helpless. It's almost jaw dropping. It'd make you feel like it's from the early 1900s. That's really how I felt with the book, and I think that was the point. It's a book that makes you feel. When you hold on to the book until the very end, you see Mary's personal reflection grow. She becomes the hero of her own story a little bit more, and she sort of redefines herself and is very explicit in how she wants to redefine herself. And as she's spoken about so eloquently, she has that power in her life right now. And really, I found little parts of it as a running aficionado interesting. When we saw the intersection of her life with that of other athletes that we grew to love, it was interesting. We really saw them for humans as well. And if anything, if nothing else, but for just context, it helps us see that a toxic peak culture is not just the fault of a coach, but it extends somewhat to the athletes as well, because when you are silent, you are complicit. So you just need to read it more for yourself to see how that really plays out. Other than that, on the book's end, the cover, you'll see, it's a close up of an athlete holding her spikes, and we now know why and how, and which is I find beautiful. The inside the layout of the book is beautiful. It's short chapters. It allows for breathing space because that's required, and the stories are focused on feelings, punctuated by quick transitions, and those transitions make you help and feel and reflect on where they are. And I think Mary was right. If we're feeling something, we should ask ourselves why, if we want to be part of that change. And lastly, I mean, you turn the book over and you see this Hall of Fame roster of athletes and people we grew to love in the sport. You see names that you recognize, and it's really cool to hear. But I do believe Mary makes a good point. There are athletes she wishes she heard from about this book. And she believes the memoir could have had a bigger impact if other people listened and at least read the book. And so that Hall of Fame roster could even be bigger if they just gave it a chance. It's a kind of book that I think could become a turning point in the history of running. At the very least, it's been building up to this. And so in the history of running, when it comes to women's sport, professional elite sporting in general, any type of sporting, when you read this, it really makes you feel like it's a cornerstone of a conversation that we need to have. And it just makes that conversation more informative. We are now equipped with more tools, and we know how to have them moving forward. And I think that is very empowering as to individuals as ourselves.
Great summary, Cheyenne.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. Thank you to Mary for spending the time with us today. Thank you to Mariner Books for providing copies of the book for review. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast or want to suggest a book that you would like for us to review in a future episode, please leave us a comment on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media to find out about new episodes when they are released, or you can just subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. If you have been listening for a while and are wondering how you can help us out, there are a few ways. If you're enjoying the podcast, spread the word, tell your friends about us, or share a link to your favorite running episode with a running partner. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, if that's how you listen to the podcast. Or you can also rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars. Or you could do both. We are now on Buy Me a Coffee, where you could buy us a coffee, listen to snippets, maybe read a bit of Alan's writing, or just get to know the amazing podcast hosts.
There are no photographs of Cheyenne on Buy Me a Coffee. We'll have to get some photographs of Cheyenne up on Buy Me a Coffee, I think, so people can see who you are.
That's fair. That's fair. The amazing podcast hosts, Liz and Alan, everything they've built. Let's do it.
That's all for Running Book Reviews for today. Bye for now.
Bye. And we're out. I had muscle memory there. I said
Very
bye
cool.
just like Liz would.
Yeah, you did.